Hello and welcome to Module 4, How to Think of Ideas Quickly and Easily, Save Time and Reduce Grammar and Vocabulary Mistakes. Planning. Planning is absolutely essential to get a band 7, 8 or 9. I don't have time to plan. This is what all of my students tell me whenever I bring up the topic of planning. Well, let me tell you that all of my band 8 and 9 students have one thing in common. They plan for at least 5 to 10 minutes before writing. I have never had a band 8 or 9 student who has achieved that sort of level without planning. Planning is essential. So these are some of the things that planning helps you to do. Planning helps you to analyze the question and answer it correctly, think of relevant ideas, structure your answer, saves you time, and reduces the amount of grammar and vocabulary mistakes. And all of these things will help you achieve higher marks. Let's just review what we did in the last module. We learned about the 4 marking criteria: task response, coherence and cohesion, vocabulary and grammar. We broke those down into simple do's and don'ts. And we learned that the key to success is giving the examiner exactly what they want and nothing else. So if you didn't look at that module, it's the most important module of the whole course, so please go back and have a look at it. So let's move on to planning. Planning has 4 main stages. First, question analysis. We have already talked a lot about this, we won't dwell on that too much. Idea generation. I have lots of different techniques to show you how to think of ideas quickly and easily. Structure planning, very important. And vocabulary, how to think of synonyms and key vocabulary before we start writing. So, if you have ever felt lost in the middle of your essay, it's probably because you don't have a proper plan, or you haven't planned in the way that I would tell you to. So if you have no plan, you think, you write, you think, you write, you think, you get lost, you make mistakes, and then you write again. If you plan, you do all your thinking and then you write. So doing an IELTS Task 2 essay is a lot like going on a journey without a map. Going somewhere in a strange place, to a place you've never been before without a map. You're always going to get lost. However, if you do all your planning, which is like a roadmap for you, before you start writing, you will know exactly what to do, what to write, and you won't get lost. So think of planning as your map that will guide you through writing your essay. Okay, so here's the question. More students are deciding to study science-related subjects at university rather than more traditional subjects. What is the main cause of this? What effect will it have on society? What I would like you to do is pause the video and use the question analysis technique that we taught you before. So what I'd like you to do is pause the video now, attempt to use the question analysis technique. That's really going to help you learn it, and then we can work on it together. Okay, so the first thing that I would do is make sure that I understand all of the words and terms in this question. So we need to think about what science-related subjects are and what traditional subjects are. Because if we don't understand these terms, then we're not really going to be able to answer the question. So what are science-related subjects? Those are subjects like, obviously, physics, biology, chemistry, but also things like computer science, engineering, anything related to science. And more traditional subjects would be things like languages, history, philosophy, law, medicine, things like that. The next thing we would need to do is understand what is the general topic. The general topic for this would be education, more specifically university education. So what we don't want to do is we don't want to write everything we know about university education, because that is not answering the specific question. The next thing we need to do is look at the specific keywords. So the specific keywords here are science-related subjects at university versus more traditional subjects. So the whole answer needs to be about the difference between these two. So we don't write everything we know about university education, we answer the specific question. And then lastly, what are the instruction words? And this is really important. If we look at these questions, what is the main cause of this? And what effect will it have on society? So it is asking you for the cause. It is not asking you what are the problems associated with this. So if you wrote the answer in a way that just discussed the problems but didn't discuss the cause, then you would be wrong. And then the second question, what effect does this have on society? If you write about solutions to this issue, you have not answered the question, because it's not asking you for solutions. It is asking you what effect this scenario has on society. So you need to be very careful about the instruction words and make sure that you are talking about the specific question and following exactly what they put in the instruction words. That's why it is so important to take time to think about the question and plan everything out and follow our question analysis technique. So there are 5 different strategies, popular strategies for thinking of ideas: brainstorming, mind mapping, something called the 6 questions method, the examples method, and the coffee shop method. Sometimes I call it the direct method. Everyone thinks of ideas differently, and you should pick the one that works best for you. The reason why I've given you 5 different strategies is everyone's brain works differently. So you shouldn't ever have a teacher tell you exactly what to do when thinking of ideas. Some people really like brainstorming. Some people really like thinking of examples. Some people really like mind mapping. Try all of them and do whatever one works best for you. So brainstorming. Brainstorming is the most popular method. It is the most commonly referred method by books and by teachers. So what is brainstorming? Brainstorming was invented a long time ago by people thinking of marketing ideas. And the reason why they brought it in was people were afraid to submit their ideas because they didn't think that they were any good. So brainstorming, the idea behind brainstorming is that there are no bad ideas. You just think of as many ideas as possible. So for IELTS, what you would do is you would put the question in the middle of the paper, and you would think of as many ideas as possible. Now, some people really like this, but let me tell you a few problems with it. It leads to very irrelevant ideas. Because you're thinking of as many ideas as possible, you're not thinking about relevancy. You're not thinking about specific ideas related to the question. So by the end of 2 minutes or 3 minutes, when you finish with your brainstorming, you have a page full of ideas, and some of them might be relevant, whereas others might not be relevant. And then because you have so many ideas, it takes a long time to pick the ones that you think are suitable for your essay. So number 1, it can lead to very irrelevant ideas, and number 2, it takes a long time. So if you like brainstorming, that's fine. However, it does have limitations. Mind mapping. Mind mapping is very, very similar to brainstorming, but it is a little bit more organized. What it is you have these branches coming from a central topic in the middle of the page, and you organize your thoughts in this way. I think that this is just fancy organized brainstorming. I don't think that this works because, again, it leads to you thinking of many irrelevant ideas, and it also takes a long time to actually write everything out and have all of these ideas. However, some people really like this and it works for them. If this type of organization works for you, if you like to see all of your thoughts on a page, then please try this method, but do be aware that it has some limitations as well. 6 questions method. This method helps you by asking very specific questions and generating ideas that way. So, Who, if we go back to the question, okay, so if we go back to this question just to remind you about it, what are the causes of people studying science-related topics? If we think about it. So who? Students. They are the people who are studying it. Big tech companies like Apple are the people who want students to study science-related ideas. What? What are the subjects? Computer science, engineering, computer programming, things like that. Why? Money. Most of the best paid jobs are now in big tech companies. The prominence of the internet, and modern culture is all about technology. So where? Silicon Valley is where a place just outside San Francisco where all the big tech companies are. Stanford and MIT are two big universities that specialize in technology, so that's where the students are going. How? Apply to university, that's how they do it, and graduate with a degree. So the last question, when? Just in the last 10 or 20 years have people started really studying computer science, engineering, computer programming. So with these 6 very specific questions, you have very specific ideas about the question, and there are too many ideas there really, but these will help you form your main ideas. Some people don't like this method because it's too logical. However, if you think very logically, this might be the best method for you. This method uses real examples to help you think of ideas. So this is a very practical method of thinking of ideas. All you do is think of real life examples. So here are some examples that I thought of quickly. Facebook, Apple, and Google. This is one of the main causes of people wanting to study. Personal experience, your phone. Everyone is looking at apps all day. Most people are addicted to their phone. So they might think, oh, I want to work for a company like Uber or Facebook that make apps. I read a newspaper report recently that talked about the shortage of teachers for science degrees. So this is one of the effects. And I read a survey recently that says graduates from Stanford make more money than Harvard for the first time ever. Stanford is a very technology-oriented university, whereas Harvard is more traditional subjects. So this would be a good example I could use. So let's look at the final method. This is my favorite method. Sometimes I call this the direct method. Sometimes I call it the coffee shop method. So the reason why I came up with this was because students in my class were failing to think of ideas because of stress and pressure of the exam. In class, they had no problems thinking of ideas. So I had lots of students who, when I talked to them in class or when they were talking to their classmates about these problems, they had no issue with thinking of 3, 4, 5, 6, even more ideas. However, whenever they went to do the exam, they couldn't think of ideas. So why was that? Take yourself out of the exam and imagine you're sitting with a friend in a coffee shop and they ask you the question, what would you say? So if you were sitting with a friend in a coffee shop and they asked you, why do you think so many students are studying science-related degrees these days? You would have no problem thinking of 3 or 4 ideas. And if they said to you, what are the effects of this? You would have no problem thinking of 3 or 4 ideas. So what you do is you ask yourself the direct question. Instead of brainstorming or writing out mind maps and wasting time, all you have to do is just ask yourself the direct question. So you would ask yourself, what are the causes of students studying more science-related degrees? Oh, I've got an idea. What are the effects of this? Okay, I've got an idea. So some people like this. I really love it. Some people don't like it. But try all of the methods and they should really help you. The direct method leads to the most specific ideas and it is the fastest method for answering any question. So what I would recommend you do is try the 5 different ways of thinking of ideas and pick the one that is most suitable for you. So I want to share with you some bonus idea generation techniques. Over the years, we have been working with thousands of students on the VIP course, and we have found that some students really love the previous idea generation techniques and they use those, but others have said that they find these bonus techniques more useful. So I'm going to share these with you now. The first thing I want you to know before I share these with you is you don't have to use all of these techniques. What we are doing by sharing multiple idea generation techniques with you is giving you a range of different tools, and then you can practice using these different techniques and choose the one or two or maybe three that you find very, very, very useful, and then you can use those during your preparation time and on test day. So remember, you don't have to use all of these. I'm just giving you a range of different ones, and you can pick the ones that are most useful to you. Some students like to just give the most obvious answer. So many students who are very straightforward people, they say, I don't need the coffee shop method or brainstorming or any of these complicated techniques. When I see a question, I just look at the question and the most obvious answer comes to me pretty much immediately. So a lot of people who think in this way find this technique really useful. They just look at the question and the most obvious answer pops into their brain immediately. Another useful one is if you asked 100 people this question, what would be the common answer? So if you were on the streets of London or New York or any English-speaking city and you were going around asking multiple people this question, what would most people say? That will allow you to put yourself in another person's shoes and think about the most obvious, the most common, the most straightforward answer. And this helps people who tend to generate very complex, complicated answers. So if you are the type of person that struggles with idea generation because you try and think of the most complex, complicated answer and you want to simplify everything, this technique might work for you. The third bonus technique is, what would someone different from you think? Often students will complain about task 2 questions and they will say, well, the question is about men and I am a woman and I don't know anything about men. Or the question is about medicine and I work in engineering. I don't know anything about health or medicine or anything like that. So instead of thinking about things from your perspective, try and put yourself in someone else's shoes and think about it from their perspective. So if you are a man, what would a woman think? If you are from one country, what would someone from a completely different country think? If you are from a middle class background, what would someone from a working class background think? If you are a conservative person, what would a progressive person say? And this really helps students who get stuck, who look at a question and might be able to generate one idea, but then they have to generate a second one, and they can think of one from their own perspective, but they find it very, very difficult to think of a second one because of their limited life experience. So if you get stuck, that might be one that will help you. And the fourth one, this is one that I really like because I used to be a lawyer and I find making arguments quite useful. So I don't mean an argument as in shouting at people or getting violent or aggressive with people, but in the same way that a university lecturer would, or a professor would make an argument about their subject, or how a lawyer would make an argument in court. If you were trying to prove your point, what idea would you use? I find this very useful because it forces me to think of the strongest point, the point that would win an argument. So if you enjoy this one, or you find this one useful, try and think of it as someone who thinks the complete opposite to you, or you are arguing with them and they don't believe your point, or they don't believe your opinion or your position. And this can really, really help. So try those out. Some of them might not work for you at all. Some of them might really work. Again, I know I'm repeating myself. You don't have to use them all. I try and give everyone a range of different techniques because everyone's brains work differently. We all learn in different ways and think in different ways. Choose the one or two that work for you and then stick to that one. Okay, so going on to stage 3, structure planning. So we have analyzed the question. We have thought of relevant ideas. The next thing we need to do is plan our structure. So this will help us organize our sentences. So what will happen by the end of it is we will have a sentence by sentence structure, and that will help us, that will provide a map for us before we start writing. So no matter what method you choose, you should not start writing until you've organized your ideas into a structure. This is really important, especially people who choose to do brainstorming or mind mapping. If you start writing immediately, you'll probably get lost. And this will lead to higher marks for coherence and cohesion. If you have an organized plan, you will have an organized essay, and that will boost your marks for coherence. Think of it as a map. Okay, so structure planning. What is structure planning? Let's look at the question one more time, just to remind ourselves of the question. So our introduction, the structure for this type of question would be, we paraphrase the question first, then we outline our main ideas. Okay, so the introduction has 2 sentences. Paraphrase the question, outline main ideas. Supporting paragraph number 1. So we skip a line and we write our main point. Then we would write our explanation. Supporting paragraph 2, same, main point, explain main point, give our example. Conclusion, we summarize our main points and we give our opinion one more time. So this is our basic structure. So what we do is we take this structure which we have memorized. I have structures for each of the 5 different types of question, so it's easy to memorize them all. So all you have to do is just insert your points. So for example, causes, our main point is high-paying jobs. Explain that. Students are attracted to a high salary, to the high-paying jobs. Our example, Google and Apple. Second paragraph, so our main body paragraph. So this would be the effects. Main point, innovation. Innovation means thinking of new inventions, thinking of new ideas. Explanation, there's lots of intelligent people all focusing on technology and on science. Therefore, there will be lots of new inventions and lots of new ideas. An example, smartphones. Lots of people were attracted in the last 10 years or last 20 years to working for Apple or working for Samsung, and the result has been massive changes in smartphones, huge innovation in smartphones that you could see in any iPhone. So this is our basic structure for our essay, and it should only take you a few minutes to insert your ideas in here. So one of the biggest mistakes students make is repeating the same words over and over again, especially keywords from the question. We can avoid this by thinking of some different ways of expressing keywords from the question. So this is our 4th part of our planning. We have analyzed the question, we've thought of ideas, we have inserted those ideas into a memorized structure, and next we're going to think of some vocabulary. It's much easier to think of vocabulary when you focus on them, rather than trying to think of them in the exam. So I don't know how your brain works, but my brain is much better at focusing on one thing at a time. So it's much easier for me and most students that I've met to just think of vocabulary, just spend 2 minutes just thinking of vocabulary before I start writing. It is much more difficult to think of vocabulary when you're writing at the same time. So let's think keywords from the question and look at other ways to say them. So some synonyms. So the first synonym or keyword would be students. We could say graduates or undergraduates. University, we could say college, 3rd level education, or tertiary education. Science related subjects, computer science, physics, chemistry, engineering. So these are all examples of science related subjects. There are also synonyms. And traditional subjects, medicine, law, dentistry, traditional courses. So subjects, courses are also synonyms. So it only took maybe 1 minute, 2 minutes to think of these ideas, to think of these synonyms. So that means you start your essay and you already have on a sheet of paper a huge range of words. These are more than enough to get a band 8 or a band 9 for vocabulary. Now write. So we can now write without thinking about the following. We don't have to think about how to answer the question. We don't have to think about relevant ideas. We don't have to think about structure, and we don't have to think about vocabulary. So what we can do now is just focus on writing, on making sure we write accurate sentences. So let's focus on timing a little bit. You have 40 minutes to complete task 2. 10 minutes planning. Some people can plan in 5 minutes, some people can plan in 10 minutes. These are just estimates. Most essays are around 12 sentences long. Some essays are 11 sentences, some essays are 14 sentences, but most essays are around 12 sentences. If you took 2 minutes per sentence, that's 24 minutes. I think everybody who is trying to get a 7, 8, or a 9 is more than capable of writing one sentence every 2 minutes. So you look at your plan, you write the sentence, you read the sentence one more time, check, all good, then you move on to the next sentence. If you can do that 12 times in 2 minutes, that's 24 minutes. So in total, if you planned for 10 minutes and then you wrote for 24 minutes, that is 34 minutes. So you have 6 minutes for reviewing and checking our work. So lots of people think that, oh, I don't have enough time for planning. However, as you can see, if you planned for the full 10 minutes, you would have a very clear structure with all of your ideas inserted and all of your vocabulary thought about already. So I think you are more than capable of getting everything done, just your writing, in 24, 25, 26 minutes. Try this at home. Try 10 minutes planning, 25 minutes writing, and 5 minutes of reviewing and checking. And when you first start doing it, you might run over. It might take you 50 minutes, or it might take you 55 minutes. But the more you practice and the more you get used to everything, the quicker you will get it done. I promise you, after enough practice, you will be able to do the whole essay in much less than 40 minutes. So let's look at what we did in this module. Let's review. So we looked at how we can plan and why we should plan. We should plan for a lot of different reasons, including saving us time and helping us with ideas, helping us with structure, helping us with vocabulary, and helping us with grammar. Overall, helping us get higher marks. We looked at the 5 different techniques for how to quickly and easily think of ideas. You should practice with each of the techniques, try each of the techniques, and see which one you like the best. We looked at how to organize our time, so 5 to 10 minutes for planning, about 2 minutes per sentence for writing, and about 5 or 6 minutes for reviewing and checking at the end. And we looked at how to reduce vocabulary and grammar mistakes. So we can reduce vocabulary mistakes by focusing on vocabulary before we start writing, making it part of the planning process. And then because we can focus on writing our sentences and not have to think about anything else, it helps us reduce our grammar mistakes. And it gives us more time to check our grammar at the end. So let's look at what we're going to do in the next module. In the next module, it's all about introductions. So we're going to look in detail about how to write an introduction for any type of question. Okay, see you in the next module. Thank you very much. Goodbye.